And welcome to another episode of Preparing for the Unexpected. I'm your host, Alex Fullick, and as always, we like to talk about things related to resilience, business continuity, disaster planning, COVID, anything that helps you, your organization, or your community plan for, respond to, and overcome adverse situations. Speaking of topics, today we are going to be talking about a topic that was presented at BCI World in November, or BCI Virtual World. I better get the name right; they'll get mad at me. In November, I was presenting there. For longtime listeners, you'll know that I talked about it for quite a while, and that every week I said I hoped to be able to speak with, a couple of the presenters there and have them come on the show and talk about what they presented there. And today I am lucky enough to do that. The topic, before I forget, is leading for resilience, creating resilience in the teams you lead. And I'd like to welcome to the show the presenter of that topic, Tammie Horton. Tammie, welcome to the show.
Hi, Alex. Thanks for having me on the show.
Oh, it's a pleasure to have you here. Now, I know you and I have exchanged emails and, I've attended BCI, but I've got listeners and now with the YouTube channel, viewers all around the globe. So could you take a minute or two and talk about yourself, what you do and how you got into what you do?
Yeah, sure. So my name's Tammie Horton. I'm the CEO and founder of Phoenix Initiative. We're an organisation that do mental health training and coaching. And so, of course, part of that is doing resilience building. So how I got into this was I have my own lived experience of mental health issues. My own, but also of caring for a partner and children, and also being a manager of staff who have had mental health issues. And all the while I was in the public service, I kept on, all these people kept on being drawn into my proximity that were struggling. But I've always wanted to help people. And I thought it was, as an IT help desk operator. So that's where I started. Then it kind of moved to being a manager of those teams. And then I got given the opportunity to be the business continuity manager for the department that I was working with. Now, this was something completely new to me. And I thought, well, I'll give it a go. Apparently, someone had said that I was a good operator. I don't know who had told them that, but anyway, I thought I'll give it a go. And I absolutely loved doing the business continuity work because it was then able to help lots more people, was actually helping the organization to become more resilient, identifying where potentially we would have problems. But when I got the job, we were going through a really major change in part of the organization I was in. So I was actually having to use a lot of personal resilience skills, but also trying to build the resilience up in the team because we had so much pressure that was being put on us to deliver for multiple organizations, and management was changing. Our director left, people wanted to go, and it's just like trying to hold everyone together. And so I stayed with that team and I really loved doing the work, but I still kept on being called for this. I've got to do something else.
Mhm.
I kept on being drawn back to the people resilience rather than the organization itself. It was the people resilience stuff, and I was thinking, how can I do more of this? And so that's when the idea of the Phoenix Initiative came into play, because the Phoenix is a regenerative being, right?
Mhm.
It When it comes to the end of its life, it sets itself on fire and it transforms and it rises from the ashes. So that's kind of a bit what resilience is. You get knocked back, so how can you then rebuild yourself to rise up? So I decided in 2018 to leave the public service and start my own business. And, it's now starting to grow, which is fantastic. And COVID gave me a bit of a tap last year because I had to stop doing some of the face-to-face things. But, I proved that I was resilient because I moved to online. And I haven't looked back since I've left. So, but I'm very, very much focused around the personal resilience and building that resilience up within teams in order for then organizations to be resilient. Because if you don't have resilient people, then you're going to struggle.
Exactly. I was just thinking that, that, you know, when it comes to organizational resilience, everybody starts at the top, and they think processes. Well, if you're starting at the top, that's okay if it's the people side of it, or they focus on process. But overall, you've got to do it for all people, or the entire organization won't work. So just to clarify, because sometimes I hear different definitions, what is your definition of resilience?
Okay, so my definition of resilience is for everyone to be able to manage the everyday stresses that come up in life, and to be able to bounce back from those inevitable setbacks that we have, but also to proactively prepare for setbacks that we're going to have in the future. And we're human beings, right? We're all going to have setbacks of some kind, whether that's losing a family member to death, or losing a job, or maybe having a car accident. It's being able to prepare ourselves for those things that will happen. Not necessarily in terms of specificity. Oh my God, that word doesn't work. Specific things, but being able to prepare ourselves so that when we do get hit back, we then are not knocked back, for months on end. It's maybe just a few weeks, and then we can pull ourselves back again, because we can't always go back to where we were.
Right. Well, if you go back where you were, you really didn't overcome the situation. You're kind of still in the same spot. You didn't move forward.
That's right.
Right. You didn't learn
That's
anything.
right.
Yeah.
No. So, and it's about being able to learn those skills then, and be ready for it. And building resilient skills is for everybody. A lot of people think, oh, yeah, but it's only for those people that aren't particularly strong-minded, but it's actually for everybody, because we're all going to get knocked back at some point. It's just part of the human experience.
I'm going to go off our agenda here a little bit, but is there characteristics that make one person better at becoming resilient and making themselves more resilient than others? Are there different mindsets or different kinds of people that sway how resilient they can become?
I think we can all become very resilient, but there will be some people that might struggle more than others. So people who have a very traumatic childhood may struggle with their resilience more than others, because as that's basically where our resilient skills are starting to be built as little kids, and it can go either way. So you can have a very traumatic background and be super resilient because you've had to work out lots of ways to do things, but then it can be the other way. So I don't think there's anything really specific. It's very much an individual thing, and if I look back at myself as a younger person, I wasn't very resilient, but I've done an awful lot of work in the last few years, and so I'm much more resilient. So I would never have been able to cope with COVID 10 years ago. Whereas now it's like, oh yeah, okay, so what do we need to do differently? So it is, you need to take a lot of ownership around building your own resilient skills. And it's a lot of personal responsibility, because you're the only person that can control the things that happen, that how you respond to things. You can't necessarily control the things that happen to you, but you can certainly control how you respond to it. So it's very much an individual thing. It is a mindset thing. And, people, you need to have role models around you that can also help you. So having that connection, and that's what, when we start looking at all the different domains of personal resilience, if you don't have a network of people that you can connect to and rely on, then you're going to struggle.
What kind of people?
Just having connections with human beings. So I think during COVID, a lot of people have really struggled because they've had to work from home. They are missing that actual human connection, because as human beings, we are hardwired for that, and we actually need the physical proximity of people, not just the Zoom stuff, because we're still just looking at pictures. And as human beings, we give off a lot of energy. We're an energetic being, and we need to feel that energy from other people. And when we don't get it, we tend to struggle. So it's people that are supportive. If you've got a group of people around you that are constantly, telling you that you can't do things, that, the dreams that you have or the vision that you have of where you want to go, if that's no good, if there's a lot of negativity around you, well, then that's not going to help you either. So you need to be surrounded by people that support you in your process. So someone kind of says, proximity is power. So if there's somewhere where you want to be, you need to associate with people that are already where you want to be, so that you can feed off that energy that they already have, and emotions are contagious. So in a workplace, for example, if you've got a team that you've got a lot of negativity in, that it's just going to feed off itself. Whereas if you've got some people that are in there that are positive, then they can bring that positive energy and bring it up. So that's kind of a really long-winded way of explaining that. It's very individual.
No, that's good. I'm going to go off script again. What if somebody is kind of in a negative situation or a funk, so to speak, and they are surrounded by people who feed that more negativity? And you said it's a mindset personal. So how do let's say I'm that person, and we're going through COVID, how can I turn that around? How can I say enough? I want to become resilient. I want to become better. I want to get out of this funk. How do I break away from that?
Okay. What you've just said is the actual very first starting point, is saying, I've got to change something, right? I don't want to be in this space anymore. So I need to do something else. So just by changing that little bit of energy in your mindset is the starting point. And then you need to seek out stuff that is, or people that are going to help you to move out of that space. And if you're not going to get that in the workplace, then you need to get it outside of the workplace. So whether that's with family or friends, or going out and doing community things. I know for me, so this is kind of a little bit of some of my personal background. I was in a very abusive relationship for a very long period of time. And as a consequence of being in that relationship, I became very, very isolated from everybody outside of work. So, and work was my respite. So I'd go and I'd make some friendships with them. But then when I left that relationship, I had to learn how to make friends again. And that was a really, really scary thing to do. But I knew if I didn't, then I was just, I was going to be sitting at home alone, and my mental health was not going to do very well because I would have been thinking about everything that I should have been doing or shouldn't have been doing, and beating myself up. So I joined a meetup group, which I'm sure there are meetup groups in America. So
Canada.
Canada. Yeah, sorry. So I went to this meetup group. Now, it was a very out there meetup group. I probably, jumped in the deep end. But as a consequence of going to just that one night, I've now met a person who is becoming a business partner for me now. I became a regular at the event, and I met all these amazing people that came along into the meetup group because it changed every week. And I started to make new friends, and I pushed some barriers. So that was kind of the start of my journey. So it's really about choosing to make a change and looking for stuff that drives you. So a whole bunch of that is working out, what is it that I really want to do? So, or where is it that I want to head? So having a purpose or a vision of where you want to go, and then sitting down and working out, so how am I going to get there? Who is it that I can do this? So it might be that you listen to podcasts of people that inspire you, or talk about things that you're interested in. Or, my kids bought me a ukulele, and I, started to learn how to play the ukulele. Now I'm part of a ukulele group that goes performing in places,
Nice.
So wherever you can, stuff that brings you joy, I think is a good place to start. So stuff that makes you happy, because the more things that bring you joy, it's easier to do, and then you can kind of build from that.
It sounded or reminded me of, if it starts with me making that conscious decision that I want to change, I want to be better. It almost sounds like, like an alcoholic. You can't help an alcoholic, and an alcoholic won't change until they admit themselves that a change is needed.
Yeah,
You know,
exactly.
so
Exactly.
that's it's interesting how that it starts. It's almost Buddhist in nature. It starts with you. You know,
Absolutely.
that's where
Yeah.
it is. In your presentation at BCI, you talked about the resilient self, and there were 6 different components related to that. Could you kind of talk about those, what those 6 are, and explain them a little bit? I thought they're rather interesting.
Yeah, sure. So when you have a look at, when you do the Google search on the internet, there's a lot of different resilience frameworks, and they all have these things in common. And so that being a resilient person, there's lots of different aspects to that. So the first one is having a purpose or a vision. So if you don't have a direction in which you're headed, then it's going to be like you're just, floating around in the pond with no movement at all, and you're not going to keep moving forward. So the first part of it is having a direction of where you're going to head. Now, sometimes that can be very unclear.
Is that um, uh, like career oriented or personal oriented, or something? I want to write a book, or something like that. What what does purpose actually refer to,
Yeah.
if it was me?
Well, it's really what fits for you. So if we're talking about building resilient, because we're talking about building resilient teams, so
Mm-hmm.
let's talk about the workplace. So it's like, well, what is it that you want to do with your career? So if you have no idea what you want to do with your career, you don't know where you're going to move, you don't know so then you don't know what skills you need to build. You don't know, whether you want to move up into the ladder, you don't know when you're going to retire. If you don't have it as some kind of plan, that keeps you on a path, so to speak, then when you start getting hit with difficult times, it just becomes even more murky, because it's like, well, now I really don't know what it is that I want to do, because all this stuff's happened, and I haven't done anything that keeps me online. Whereas if you've got something, well, I've said that I want to get to this level in the company, I need to build these skills, then this stuff's happened and they're moving me in this path. Well, what is it that I need to do to get back to where I need to be?
Okay.
So that's kind of your purpose stuff. The next part of it is a self-control or composure. So when we're talking about that, it's being able to manage our emotions. And so when we're under stress, our very primitive responses tend to come out. So this is where, and we're going to talk a little bit about it a bit later, the limbic brain, or the lizard brain, it gets fired up. So when we're under stress. So having self-control is being able to recognize, oh, hey, I'm under stress right now. I'm going to have to be mindful that I might get a bit snippy with people, or, I tend to, work longer hours or ignore people when I get under control, or, when I get really angry, I burst into tears, and people might think I'm sad, but I'm not. I'm actually really angry. So having that self-control is really important. So, and it helps us to stay focused as well on our goals. Then we've got perseverance. So this is kind of that stick-to-itiveness. So, how long are you going to stick with things before you give up? And so if, you give up too easily, well, then you're actually never going to get to the other side of that uncomfortable period. And it's actually through the uncomfortable periods that we have that we actually grow. So you kind of do have to stick to things, but in a realistic way, because there's no point in sticking with something that's not going anywhere. So if you're in an organization where, you've got a boss that's above you that is a bit of a tyrant, and they're not going to change, and you can see that your mental health's declining, or that, you're just going to be constantly hitting against this wall all the time, then you need to choose to, like, okay, yep, I'm going to move around that obstacle. So it's kind of that stuff. The foundational one is your health. So if you don't have a good health base, your resilience is really going to struggle. So when I talk about health, it's about having good sleep, fueling yourself with good food and exercise. So sleep is, vitally important to our body. It's where it repairs things. And, when we don't have sleep, our composure goes down, just everything goes out of whack. If we're not feeding our body good food, then our energy levels tend to fluctuate a lot. And when the energy levels fluctuate, then our emotions tend to fluctuate as well. Same thing with exercise. If we're feeling really sluggish, then we don't have motivation to get moving, to do other things. The next one is reasoning. So this is being able to do problem solving. So the reasoning stuff is to being able to look at where there might be opportunities. So you might be being hit with different setbacks, but what are the opportunities in those setbacks? Because, there's always going to be opportunities in there, rather, so you can kind of work out ways of getting around them or over them or under them, or maybe just going straight through, that type of stuff. And then the final one is that connection stuff that I was talking about. It's a critical need for the human brain to have connections with other human beings that are secure and positive. So but even if you don't have that, having a connection with a pet might be but something that you can talk to, relate to, just put stuff out there. I know that sometimes, I have ideas going through my head, and one of my future son-in-laws, who I call my tech expert, might pop around and we just start talking about stuff. And then I say, oh, thanks so much for helping me with that problem. He goes, what problem? And I said, so it's just by being able to talk out loud about something and have someone else hear it and go, oh yeah, that sounds good, or is really helpful. So that's kind of the other one. So with all of those 6, you can have things that are sitting really high, some that are sitting really low, and so you need to be working on all 6 domains, at some point. So that's kind of the nutshell.
How does COVID affect that? If you're trying to lead a team and balance all those 6 areas, it's got to amp things up by 100, because it's got to be tough, because you don't have the connection. Somebody can look, and you mentioned, break out in tears or show anger, but then just drop off a call. So you can't get in touch with them to try and address what's going on. COVID has got to have increased some of the challenges with these six items.
Yeah, yes, absolutely. I've got an example of, because I was running a mental health first aid course just recently, and one of the participants there was talking about a member of staff that she was quite worried with, who worked in a different city, was working very remote, and they'd had some other traumatic stuff happen in the team as well as having COVID. And this person is now starting to not get on camera. The text responses are getting shorter and shorter and shorter. And so being able to have that human connection stuff is so vitally important, so that you can pick up on when things are sliding early. And this kind of goes into my mental health first aid stuff as well. Mm-hmm. And when I talk to leaders, saying to them, you have to get to know your people. And I've had people say, yeah, but I'm not interested in getting to know, what's going on for them outside.
I don't want to know
work.
them. Just need them.
I don't want to know. I don't want to know them. And it's like, yeah, but when you think about it, you want them, when they're at your workplace, you want them, or, they're working remotely, you want them to be giving you 100%, right? It's like, well, yeah, absolutely, because I'm paying them to do a job. And it's like, all right. So because they're a human being, what goes on for them outside of the workplace doesn't drop off when they start work. It's all still going on for them. If you can notice when someone's slightly off their game, and you can say to them, hey, I've just noticed this, and you can have a bit of a conversation around it, then you can say, what is it that's going on? What is it that I can do as a leader to help them support you to get through this little bit of a hurdle? So, look, I've managed quite a few small teams, and a couple of bigger teams as well. But I always get to know my people to a point where I had a young cadet work for me, And I knew she was having a bad day when she would slide down in her seat and the hood of her jacket would come up over her head. And I'd go up and check in on her and say, what's going on? And she goes, what do you mean? I'm going, well, you just slid down in your chair and your hood came up on your head. There's something going on for you. She goes, how do you know that? And I said, because I just know that's, was that a difficult call that you just had? It's like, yeah, well, the person wasn't very nice. And I'm going, all right, well, let's have a conversation about that. I had other staff members who walked in and he just looked so tired. I didn't necessarily need to know what was going on, but I just knew what my people were what they looked like, what some of their tells were, if they were a very chatty person normally during the day, and then for some reason they're not being very chatty for a week. So what's that about? Because if they're struggling outside of work, they're going to be struggling inside of work, and they're not going to be as productive, which is no good for you because you want them to be productive.
I think that's the part some leaders, have with their teams when you're getting to know them. I think some of them think getting to know them means I have to know all their kids' names, their dog names, their favorite color, the favorite music, and that's not what you're talking about.
No, it's getting to know what they look like. And, because I collected these staff members that had issues, I had one staff member who had worked for a number of different managers, and every single one there was problems, right? There was timesheet issues, or he wouldn't ring in, or, whatever. So he came to me and I said, okay, look, I know that there's been issues in the past, but you've got a clean slate with me. But you need to talk to me about what's going on for you, because I'm going to talk to you about what's going on for me. So it's a two-way street. So if we want this to work, it needs to happen. But I need to find out from you first, what is it that lights your fire at work? And it's like, I really love working with numbers. And I'm going, great. I said, what do you hate? He said, don't like doing customer service. Have a guess what? The last 3 jobs he'd had were all customer service jobs. So, of course, he was doing work that he didn't enjoy to start with. So, of course, he was not going to be very engaged. So I said, well, you know what? Unfortunately, this is a customer service role as well, but I guarantee you that any bit of numbers work I get, I'm going to give it to you to do. Whether it's at my level or at your level in terms of hierarchy in the organisation, I'm going to give it to you first for you to have a crack at, and then you can explain it to me. And from that day forward, I didn't have any issues with him. Even though I didn't have a lot of numbers work, I'd actually taken an interest in what lit him up. And he then, would talk to me about what was going on. He became more interactive with other members of the team. He'd let me know when stuff was coming up. It just changed the whole dynamic for him because someone took an interest. And that's, as human beings, we just want people to like us, right? We want people to say, you know what, you're doing a good job.
Yeah, it sounds so simple, doesn't it?
It does.
Yeah.
But people get so hung up on, but I'm the boss and they need to do what I tell them to do. And, I don't want to know any of this stuff, but, I don't know.
Yeah.
I seem to have a good track record managing teams. People don't want to move on from me unless they want to do different work. And then guess what? That's okay. I'll help them find another job because there's no point in them staying with me if that's not what they want to do anymore. So it's like, let me help you find work. Oh, what?
Really?
You're going to help me find a job? It's like, yeah, why wouldn't I? But, when you look at all my, I did my Gallup strengths thing just recently to work out what they are. In the top 10, I've got all the people stuff. So I'm very passionate about people and making sure that they're, living their best lives.
Yeah, which is fantastic.
Yeah.
Now, you touched on this with the limbic brain and the prefrontal cortex, and you talked about those in your presentation. Can you talk about those in a bit more detail now? Yeah,
sure. So when we're talking about building resilience, there's 2 parts of our brain that are the main parts. So one is the limbic brain. So this is the oldest part of our brain. It's the oldest part in terms of our the way we've evolved. It's at the very back in the center of our brain, and it's responsible for our fight-flight mechanism. So it's very much about readiness and alert, and it's subconsciously, it's the thing that is constantly scanning our environment all the time as to, am I safe, basically? Is there going to be a saber-toothed tiger that's going to be chasing me any second? So that's one part. The other part of the brain is the prefrontal cortex, and this is the newest part of our brain when we look at evolution, and it's the part that's responsible for problem solving. It has our creativity in there. It has our personality, all the higher thinking stuff that separates us from other animals. Now, when we're talking about resilient stuff, our limbic brain, when it comes across a situation that makes it feel uncomfortable, it fires up, and if it checks with the rest of the brain to see whether it should activate or not. And if it doesn't hear anything back from the rest of the brain to say, no, everything's okay, then it'll go into fight, flight response.
Does that link back to the things you were saying before, like the perseverance and managing your emotions? Does it link back to that?
Yes. Yeah, it does.
Okay.
Yeah. So if you haven't built skills to be able to say to the limbic brain, yeah, hey, yep, we know this situation's new. So it's like I spoke to you before I came on air today, my limbic brain was getting a bit activated because I'm doing an interview, right? My nerves started to play out, and I started to feel nauseous because, I experience anxiety anyway. So I was starting to get this response. That was my limbic brain saying, there's stuff that's going to be happening that I don't know about. So I had the front part of my brain needed to say, yes, that's okay. You're allowed to feel nervous. This is an unknown situation, but it's going to be all right. Let's just take a few deep breaths and let's just calm down. It's all fine. We don't have a saber-toothed tiger chasing us today.
And that Alex food ain't so bad.
No, and he's been really lovely. So we need to build those skills up, though. And unfortunately, most of our automatic responses get built when we're kids. So, and because we've got very young brains and absolutely everything is brand new. So if we don't have good role models around us, or even just everyday things, like I've got a friend who's written a book that's about trauma, and because we have a definition that trauma is all about these big things that happen, but actually trauma happens when we're really little kids, because it's how our brain processes things. So if a child was to lose mum in the shopping centre, like mum just went around the corner into the next aisle in the shops, and the child goes, oh my God, I've lost my mum. That's a traumatic event for that little brain, right? And so it doesn't have the skills to be able to reason to say, oh, yeah, that's okay. Mum's just gone around the corner. I know where she is. It's just like, there's that immediate response. I'm not safe anymore. My protector's not here. So a lot of our responses are developed when we're younger. So it takes, as we get older, particularly if you don't recognize it until you're a lot older, it takes a lot of work to unwire those connections. But it is possible, but it just takes a lot of effort. And so that's what, when we're starting to talk about building those resilient skills, we do it little bits at a time, because otherwise the brain's not going to hold on to those new connections. And I don't know whether you've heard the saying, fires together, wires together. So you've got to do it, lots of little times, but often. So, and we talk about micro tasks in the stuff that I do. So doing little things, but often. So to make a new pathway.
We're going to be talking about those in just a minute, I know. So we're going to go there. You were talking about micro tasks. You started to touch on that. Can you explain that a little bit more? What you meant by that?
So micro tasks are just short periods of time when you do the new activity that you're wanting to learn. So whether it's let's take something that people can relate to quite easily is learning how to play the piano, right? If you want to learn how to play the piano, it's going to take you a long time to learn. But if you sit down for an hour a day and practice over and you practice every day, you're actually going to learn how to play faster than if you were to do 7 hours in one day. Even though you're doing the same amount of practice, your brain actually keeps working after each period of practice that you do. So if you do an hour today, your brain's going to keep going afterwards because it's going to start, laying those pathways down. You do another hour tomorrow. So you're getting extra time on your practice, even though you're not doing it. But if you do it in long blocks, then it doesn't tend to sink in so well. So when we're talking about building resilience skills, then we look at doing little tasks. So today we might be doing a reinforcement thing, say around, noticing our emotions. So rather than, we're just going to sit for, on our drive to work, just notice the emotions that come up. It's like, all right, okay, so I noticed that when, people don't indicate, I tend to fire up. Oh, what is it about? And you get curious about what that is. So it's just, you're doing one little task every day for a period of time. All right, so what is it? So I noticed this. And then you can start, okay, now we're going to change the response. Okay, when someone cuts me off, rather than go, and shake your fist at someone, just maybe go wave at them and wave them in, So it's just a slight change in behavior, and you just do it. And the new pathways then will lay down. So practice makes pathways. So, and if you're trying to change a habit, because sometimes people say, oh yeah, it takes, 16 times to change a habit or 25 times to change a habit. It actually depends on how ingrained the habit is and whether what you're trying to do then goes against some of your other values. So earlier on, you mentioned like an alcoholic choosing to make a change to their drinking behavior. If they've been drinking for a very, very long period of time and they then decide to change it, it's going to take them a long time to actually change that habit because it's so ingrained in the pathway. So they have to not do one thing and do the new thing in lots of little tasks. And, there's a whole bunch of other stuff in amongst all of that as well, because generally people who have alcohol issues have got other things that they have to deal with as well. It's not just the drinking. There's a whole bunch of reasons why they're doing it in the first place. So there can be a lot of things that they're trying to change all at the same time. So it's going to take a lot of work. But the more you practice it in little steps, the better it gets. So I relate it back to my ukulele learning. I would pick up the ukulele for 15 minutes and just practice, finger movements. And, it became a lot easier doing it in little spurts because it kind of kept my interest more rather than, I've got to practice for 2 hours.
Yeah.
I can pick it up for 15 minutes and just do it. And then it's like the muscles then learn the memory as well. So that's kind of what micro tasks are all about.
It's interesting you mentioned learning piano because with COVID, I started to teach myself how to play synthesizer. So I have 2 cheap little synthesizers, and I don't expect everyone to know who he is, but Gary Newman, who sang Cars many years ago, and got lots of albums and everything, but still lots of keyboards. So I've been teaching myself a lot of his stuff, and I now can play with both hands. And I do it for an hour every day,
Excellent.
And the drinking habit, or the drinking, I shouldn't say habit, the drinking example. My father, at a time in his life, had a problem with drinking too much, and he made a change later on as well. So I made a change at the same time. I didn't have a drinking problem, but I decided, if I don't want to get to the point where I have a problem. So I started drinking, less alcohol in the beer, those cheap ones. I shouldn't say cheap ones. Sorry if anyone in the beer company is watching, sorry. Less alcohol in them to the point where I was drinking non-alcohol beer. Now I don't drink at all. And it's been 5 years, because I made that connection. I don't want to go there. This is what I want to do. I have to change my habits. And I did. I got to the point where I just looked at it and went, I don't want it, and it stopped 5 years ago. I can't have a beer now. It just, I know it won't feel good if I did. So interesting. Interesting you chose those.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's, it's things that people can relate to quite easily.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Now, let's look at resilience teams.
Yeah.
You gave some examples on how and what makes up resilient teams. So can you kind of give us some insight on that? Because I'm sure there's some team leaders and managers listening and watching right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So it's while I've been saying, we're talking about individual resilience, just because you've got a team of people, individuals that are resilient, it doesn't necessarily mean that your team is going to be resilient, because they're all resilient for their own stuff, right? They're all going along their own visions, their own pathways, they're regulating their own emotions and things. So when we're talking about building resilient teams, there are some additional things that we have to think about. So one of them is, we talk about having robust teams. So the robust teams are now about, being able to have that meaning and purpose that's common for everybody, and being able to be adaptable to the change that's happening for the team as they arise. So some of the questions that leaders need to ask themselves is, how well are they linking their team's activities to the why of the organization? How are you, as a leader, how are you proactively modeling the behaviors that you expect of everybody in the team? How do you promote adaptability to change as the leader? Are you demonstrating your value to others? So you're kind of building that connection towards one vision for the team. So then we need to be resourceful. So do your teams have all the resources that they need in order to do their work? So do you have all the skill sets that you need in order to get your work done? And if you don't have them, how are you going to go about getting them? So it might be that you need to connect with other networks to be able to bring in some skill sets, or to share resources with other people. So, and as leaders, are you modeling this? Are you having conversations where you can talk about, or what do we need to do our jobs better every day? Are there things as a manager I need to be doing for you? How can we keep each other accountable? That type of stuff. Of course, there's still the perseverance side of things as well. So this is all about having a solutions focus rather than a problem focus. So when we get hit with stuff, it's like, well, okay, so what are the solutions we're going to come up with? Again, it's that, when you get setbacks, what are the opportunities that involves? So as leaders, what type of language are you using when you're talking about problems? Are you talking about them as problems, or are you talking about them as challenges? Because that, by just changing one word, it gives a different feel to something. Problems are a lot harder to fix, but challenges, like, oh yeah, well, we can get through this. It kind of boosts the spirit. Self-care, again, it's kind of related to that health side of things, but what are you doing as a team to look after each other? How are you checking in to see how people are going? How do we manage stress as a team? Do we take a half an hour out of our busy schedules and just go for a walk outside? How are we looking after the well-being of the team? So that's the self-care stuff. Capability, it's kind of tied with that resourcefulness stuff, but do you have the skill sets? Are we getting the right feedback in order to build our capability? Are we performing well? So it's, again, having lots of conversations with people. The supportive teams, so it's, again, supporting one another. So how do we get to know each other on personal levels? How do we encourage that mutual support, or are we still working as individuals? So a team's not going to function if we're just working as individuals.
Yeah.
So we need to be supportive of one another. And that doesn't mean that, you're hanging out on the weekends and all that type of stuff, but it's just, how are we looking after each other and then the very last one is alignment. So if we're not aligned to those desired outcomes and about being optimistic and noticing our progress and celebrating our successes, then we're not going to function very well as a team. So it's kind of an additional layer on top of all that individual stuff. But it's really important that you recognize effort and you celebrate it. Even if it's just sometimes it's just the tiniest little thing of it. It's like, hey, we got through that day. Isn't that amazing? Let's celebrate, you know. I tend to be a little bit out there with my celebrations and I jump around and, you know, can be a little bit silly, but it's just like, how do you instill optimism? Because if you've got a happy workplace, it's easier to be productive. It's easier to be profitable. You know, people are going to want to come to work and do the work that they want, you know. Yeah. So, yeah, super important.
We've got a minute and a half left. Can you take, a minute with any final thoughts you might have on resilience and leadership and teams?
Yeah. So I just encourage anyone that's a leader of a team to take some time out to get to know your people, get away from the workplace and just have some time to say, hey, let's just get to know one another, because we spend an awful lot of time in each other's proximity. And, you know, so let's be the best that we can be. And how can we go about doing that? And just have conversations with people and be vulnerable. Share some of your vulnerabilities, because it's through sharing the vulnerability that you show that you're a human being, and that people are then able to talk to you about what they're struggling with. If you keep on saying, no, I'm super tough and I can handle everything, well, that's what you're demonstrating. And if people are struggling, they're not going to be able to come to you, because it's like, well, he doesn't get it or she doesn't get it, because, you know, they're always so strong and super tough. So be vulnerable. Share some of your war stories. You'll be amazed at the difference it makes.
And on that note, we've come to the end of our show. Tammie, thank you very much for all these insights and tips that you've provided. I think it's going to be really helpful, especially during these COVID times, you know, with mental health and well-being, and, you know, how that actually can help us become resilient and make our teams more resilient. I think, I wish I had more time to talk to you. It's really
been a pleasure, Alex.
So maybe another time we'll get you back and, you know, we'll talk more about some things. So thank you very much for your expertise and your time. I really appreciate it. And congratulations for your presentation at BCI Virtual World. I'm sure it went over very well. It better have gone over very well. And to everyone listening and everyone watching, in the meantime, stay prepared, everybody. If you liked that video, thumbs up. If you didn't like that video, thumbs down. But leave a message and let me know what your thoughts are. If you'd like to be a guest on the show to talk about something related to business continuity, disaster management, COVID, personal well-being, anything that's relatable to those subjects, you can reach me through my LinkedIn profile, which is in the video description. And of course, don't forget to subscribe. In the meantime, stay prepared, everybody.